Our last slideshow ended with the dysfunction of the French government as we have reigns of terror and foreign wars and economic problems in this very much politically chaotic time period for the French government, for the French people, and trying to figure out and look for, hope for someone or some group to be able to deliver the French from this time of chaos. And out of this chaos and this fracas is going to rise one man, Napoleon Bonaparte. So we're going to see here, we're going to split up talking about Napoleon into two different videos here. Here we'll see the rise of Napoleon. How does he gain control of the French government, and what does he do domestically inside of France? And in our last video for the entire unit on Indian absolutism, Enlightenment, and French Revolution, we'll see what leads to Napoleon's downfall. But before we go and bring him down, let's go and build Napoleon back up as we begin to see how does Napoleon rise to his position of power to eventually become the Emperor of France.
Right, so on the study guide, this is a classic Mr. Cranmer example of, we're going to talk about two videos in class. We usually take about 2 days to go over Napoleon here. So make sure you're leaving space, maybe take your notes in your notebook, go back, and to be able to go and figure out what's going to be the most important stuff, what's the big things here, because this is a big guy, right? It's November 21st of 2023, and this week, a couple days before, Ridley Scott's new giant 3 hour plus long movie starring Joaquin Phoenix as Napoleon is about to be unleashed on the cinemas. So this is a big deal, a big guy. But an interesting question to ask is, and maybe the movie will answer this, is Napoleon a outgrowth of just the timing that he comes to power in? Could anybody in the right spots, in the right places, pulled the right strings and have got themselves to this? If you drop a Mr. Cranmer, right, aliens abduct me, drop me back in this time period, and could I maneuver my way to becoming the emperor of the French just because of the timing that France is looking at? Or is there something innately different, right? Does Napoleon just have that dog in him, right, to be able to rise to this? Is this a talent issue or this? So something to keep in mind when we're going and thinking about this. Napoleon's going to be born on the island of Corsica. And so he's going to be kind of has an out, which is an island in the Mediterranean, one of the larger ones. Always has really been French, but again, he has that kind of also um, outsiderness to him as well. Now, the timing of this is we're talking about as the reign of terror has come to an end, but we have prices rising, we have more bread rights, and the middle class is no longer very much sympathetic to the poor that we saw them being at the start of the French Revolution. Now the middle class is very much trying to look out for their own because they see the poor as kind of taking away the growth of the middle class, and then also being a detriment to kind of continuing the revolution. So when Napoleon is rise, he's going to be backed by this new middle class, this new money, this bourgeoisie, these kind of professionals, these business owners who are going to see Napoleon as protector of their property, of their businesses, and a way to gain more money. So again, a background from he's growing up, he's going to be put into military schools very early on. He's going to be very good at mathematics, which is going to make him an excellent artillery commander. Right. So if we talk about infantry, where we're talking about soldiers, guys on the ground. If we talk about cavalry, we're talking about guys on horses. If we talk about artillery, we're talking about big guns, big cannons. And so to be successful as an artillery gunner or an artillery officer, you need to be able to do math, particularly here in the late 1700s, early 1800s, to calculate how much gunpowder you need at what angle to shoot this cannonball to be able to drop it right where you want it to go. So he is going to rise in these wars of the French Revolution from a lieutenant in the army to the commander of the French army in Italy that has uh, left France, gone over the Alps to begin to take over Italy, to fight against the monarchs of northern Italy and then towards the Pope, who don't want this, again, virus of revolution spreading beyond the French borders. So this is young, hot Napoleon. Again, as he's kind of rising up through the ranks and becoming a very hot shot, um, young, in-demand artillery officer as he's going. Eventually, he rises to be a leader of a French army, and he's going to lead this French army over the Alps to be able to attack the Italian armies on the other southern side. Now, again, we can take a look at these paintings as acts of propaganda. This is a painting by Jean-Jacques David, who again very much portraying Napoleon as this conquering hero on horseback. Again, you can see me in the beginning. You know how much hair I have, but I'm jealous. And I know we usually get some girls that'll raise their hand and admit their jealousy of how nice this horse's hairs looks in this painting, where the sun is cascading through the clouds, lighting up Napoleon as he's leading his troops in there. This is a horse on his hind legs, Napoleon fully in control. Now, we usually want to point out the graffiti here on the bottom because, again, Napoleon has etched his name in the stone on the Alps as he's crossing and going over it, just like how, what does it say down here? Carlos Magnus, Charles the Great, Charles Magnus, Charlemagne has, as well as, and it's been faded a little bit farther away, Hannibal has. So David, when he's painting this, is very much placing Napoleon on par of a Charlemagne, on par of a Hannibal in terms of his military and political exploits. What was most likely the thing is he's on something like this. He's on this beast of burden. You can feel the cold blowing through the painting here, and this is very much more the humble Napoleon versus the romantic, majestic one we see in the David painting. Now, Napoleon in 1798 is taking the French army after fighting through the Mediterranean to Egypt. Egypt is ostensibly kind of working under control, back between the Mamelukes as well as the British, and Napoleon is fighting the British in Egypt. Now, a famous naval engagement takes place where the French Mediterranean fleet meets the British Mediterranean fleet, and the British prevail under the leadership of Admiral Nelson. He might not be Lord Nelson yet, but under Horatio Nelson. They win this major battle. Napoleon is able to read the writing on the walls and see that France is not going to end well here in Egypt. And he gets word to him that things are, as bad as they are in Egypt, are going a lot worse in Paris. And that if somebody comes to Paris at this moment, they can go and create a whole lot of change and seize power for themselves. So Napoleon leaves, abandons his army in Egypt to try to walk their way back to France to go and take part in the coup d'etat, a seizing of the state in 1799. Napoleon and a couple other guys get rid of the government that's in place, the directory, establish a bicameral two-house assembly. Oh, hey, like the United States House of Representatives. Yeah, just like the United States, as well as a constitutional executive system created with three councils, going all the way back to usually, if we're following the usual order when we take their notes here, in October, right, at the beginning of this school year, we talked about the Roman system of government with two councils. France, very much borrowing from that, establishes a system of three councils. Napoleon gets himself elected to first council, and he had the power to veto, he had the power to override the decisions of the other councils as well as the assembly, which pretty much gives him all the power. So what does he begin to do with this power? Well, he goes, and we'll talk more about this in a second, the Concordat of 1801, which helps reunify a lot of the religious factions in France. Some people in France don't want any religion. Some people want to be Protestant. Some people want to be Catholic. Some people want to bring the Catholic Church back. And so that's what Napoleon is kind of doing, not only to help him in France, but again, as we move towards this 1801, also on the larger world stage, particularly trying to get the Pope back on the French side as well. In 1802, Napoleon goes and is made consul for life. And then finally in 1804, Napoleon has the Pope come to Notre Dame and in a major ceremony has the Pope go and bring the Holy Roman crown as well. And as the Pope goes to crown Napoleon, just like how Charlemagne did on Christmas Day in the year 800, Napoleon stops the Pope, politely here, takes the crown from the Pope and crowns himself Emperor Napoleon I. And we're being very careful because Napoleon is well aware of the symbolism of this moment. by crowning himself. He is giving him that power. There is nobody on earth above Napoleon that he has to answer to. Charlemagne is granted that power by the Pope to become the Holy Roman Emperor because the Pope crowned Charlemagne. Napoleon, 1,000 years later, is going to take that crown for himself. And at this point, this basically evolves into a dictatorship with Napoleon as an absolute monarch back in charge of France. So what we get here, if Napoleon and the French invasion of France is again, and this might be probably apocryphal, but we get again the French outside of Giza and Cairo, back from there. The story is that again, whether it's true or not, it's a little bit up for debate. But if you go to the Sphinx today and you look at the Sphinx's head, nose has been gone for millennia by this point, but there are small holes in the Sphinx's head that some historians argue were put there because the French soldiers were using it as artillery practice. But again, take that with a grain of salt. That's what you have there. So there's many large engagements here. We're not even getting into what's going on in the water at the Battle of the Nile. But just so we know, the French and British are fighting each other in Egypt. It's not going well for the French. Napoleon hears that, but more importantly, hears that Paris is also being fraught and is being driven apart by change. So he leaves his losing army in Egypt, returns to France, and then goes and seizes power with a couple other people who opportunistic politicians to be able to go and seize power there, where he now takes charge, establishes a new government. He now appoints himself to the counselorship, gets himself elected first counselor, then counselor for life, and then again in the year 1804 will crown himself the emperor of the French. So we see the Pope sitting. That's important. Okay, Napoleon has taken the crowned himself, and now he's going to crown his wife, the Empress Josephine. So as we said, we want to focus today with this lecture in this video on what Napoleon does in charge in terms inside of France, his domestic policies. So what does Napoleon do inside of France to help the French people? Well, the first thing he does is the Concordat of 1801, which reestablishes the Catholic Church in France. It's not the official Church of France, right? But it allows the Catholic Church to operate, of which it hasn't been able to do for over a decade at this point. The major thing that he creates is his civil code, which will eventually be named after him, the Code Napoleon, which becomes the 7 basic fundamental laws of France. Vote for Napoleon, and I will have these 7 things is kind of the framework that you want to think of what Napoleon's doing at this point. So I would know these codes, I would know what these are and what they say in their simplest form here. Number 1, equality to all citizens. Unlike the Declaration of Independence, where it says all men are created equal, but this is written by Thomas Jefferson, a slaveholder, signed by many other slaveholders in the United States. Napoleon means all citizens, all men, and importantly, all women. If you are a citizen of France fighting for the ideals of the French country, you have equality. Now, again, what does that mean? That you can go read the law code deeper to figure that out, but that's the idea. It sounds nice. Number 2, individuals are allowed by law, by decree, to choose their own profession. If your dad was a blacksmith, and his dad was a blacksmith, and his dad's a blacksmith, and his dad's a blacksmith, you get to be whatever you want according to Napoleon. You got the dance inside of you, you can go and dance because Napoleon says it's okay. 3, religious toleration. We've seen, going back to the Edict of Nantes in 1588 with Henry IV, France is being still brought by religious dis, dysfunction, discordance, and so this allows everybody to choose their own religion. There's no official church in France, and so this allows for more people to not have to worry about how they're worshiping, particularly how they're being Christian and being punished for that politically, economically, socially. Number 4, we see the abolition of serfdom. Not that there was a whole lot of serfdom left here in France, but this gets rid of it. Again, very much towards that equality to all citizens. And again, working away, we're going to see England is working through an abolition movement at the time period. We'll see the United States outlaw the slave trade to bring foreign slave Africans into the United States in 1809. So very much caught up in that time period. Now, trade unions and strikes are outlawed, which seem to be going against the grain here. But remember, France is in a fight for its life. When we talk about a concept we'll get into in World War I of total war, where the entire total economy is placed on a war footing to keep the army fed, clothed, paid, and equipped. You can't have people in the gun factory going on strike for better hours and better wages because then guns don't get made, soldiers don't get guns, soldiers die, the revolution fails. So those are outlawed by Napoleon. Property rights are preserved for some of the people that have had their property taken away through various um, cycles of the revolution, and individual rights are also guaranteed. Women are still inferior, so again, goes to all citizens, but again, they still have some rights they didn't have before, thanks to Napoleon. Some of the other things that he does in terms of reorganizing France is he creates the Bank of France. All citizens pay their taxes, and those taxes don't go to the nobleman who collects it, who then gives it to the king. All the taxes collected by the citizens paid, and here's the key word, all, so that's nobles and commoners and third estate alike, are put into the Bank of France. And the Bank of France then uses it to pay the debts of the French government, as well as the bank is then able to give out loans to spur industrial and other development within the country to spur more domestic economic growth, which is good. And then the bank makes money off interest from those loans, and it becomes a much more stable uh, financial footing that the government of France needs. Not perfect, but it's much better than what they had. Napoleon goes creates lycées, or a system of public schools for the country of France. Charles de Gaulle, who become the leader of France in the mid 20th century, famously says, "How can you unite a country that has 200 types of cheeses?" And so France, for a very long time, has been very regional, as you very much think of yourself in your own province or your own region of France, and that's how you identify, rather than as a French person for a very long time throughout French history. And this has an effect on the French language to where a Frenchman speaking French in the north of France, in say Brittany or Normandy, would not understand someone speaking French on, say, the French Riviera or in Marseille or in Provence in the south of France. The public schools go a long way in uniting France by creating a standard system of French, quote unquote, that's taught to all the school children, and again, giving most school children a common thing to fall back on. Just like how all of you, when you're in your 30s and 40s, can go and enjoy a relaxing evening with your friends, and the ones you meet in college, the ones you meet in your businesses, you all can relate to, oh, that one history teacher that made you have to work hard, or that one math teacher that inspired you. You all have that, or that one time at your school that, hey, did your school do that? You all have that background to fall back on, which again helps bring in a common idea for what to do. And if everybody's being taught similar things, that's going to give a very much common way of thinking in a country. Taxes, we talked about again and again and again through these couple of videos, is a problem for France. So Napoleon reorganizes and kind of rebuilds the French tax system. The taxes are collected by professional tax collectors. That is their job. If they do bad at that job, they get fired from that. So professional tax collectors do that. So, and it's not individuals, you're working for the French government. There's no exemptions due to class. You can't say, I'm the Duke of Provence, or I'm the Duke of Languedoc, or I'm this, I'm that. There is no tax exemptions. Everybody in France has to pay taxes. The amount you have to pay varies, but you have to do that. And this is a system that works. This is helpful, right? Taxes are good because taxes provide services for people from the government. And so the stuff that's paid, that the government pays out for all the things that it provides should get money paid in by taxes, and this tax system is going to lead to the first balanced budget that France has for a extraordinary long time in 1802, where the amount of money France pays out, and remember, France is fighting a couple wars outside of France at this time period, is equal to the amount of money France brings in, meaning that at the end of the year, France has $0 that they've made, but they also owe anybody $0. So that's kind of what you want as a government. Money in, money out should be equal. These tax collectors have their appointments based on the merit and ability. Good tax collectors are promoted, bad tax collectors are getting rid of to help improve the French economy. Finally, Napoleon tries to bring a sense of order and a sense of rationality to the measurements in France. We've seen this with the Chinese emperors. We've seen this with the Persian emperors. We see this with Augustus. A standardized system of weights and measures is put throughout France, and this is a system of the metric system, where you have 100 millimeters, right, is in a centimeter, right, 10 centimeters in a decimeter, 10 decimeters in a meter, and then so on and so forth, all on a base 10 system, which makes it a lot easier to be able to calculate distance. It's a lot easier math to be able to chunkify stuff into. The official meter, the meter that all other meter sticks are measured against throughout the world, is held in Paris because of Napoleon's decree to do this. And we'll talk about this in our next video, Napoleon and his army successfully begin to conquer and move their way throughout Europe, Napoleon is going to bring the metric system with him and help spread that metric system throughout all of Europe, becoming the dominant measuring system, not only in science, but around the world today, except for goofball countries like the United States. So we showed you Napoleon as first consul, and here's the official portrait of Napoleon as emperor, as he's then going to be the ruler of the French Empire that he's created. Napoleon is at the height of his power within France, and he's not only in the height of his power within France, but also outside of France, and we'll see how he does that in our last video on the French Revolution and for our unit on absolutism, enlightenment, and the French Revolution.